The Hartwell University Library wasn't the kind of place that liked change. Its walls had seen too many seasons, too many students, too many stories folded into the quiet air between pages. The building stood since 1913, and even after renovations, it carried the smell of dust, varnish, and the faint ghost of paper that refused to die. By day, it belonged to chatter and coffee cups and the sound of keyboards punching out last-minute essays. But by night after midnight it changed. The air grew thicker, heavier. The silence had a shape. That's when Miguel Alvarez worked. He wasn't a superstitious man. He'd been cleaning these floors for almost 7 years. His schedule was the same: start at 10, finish at 6, and try not to think too hard about what made a building breathe after hours. But tonight felt different the moment he walked in. The fluorescent lights at the main desk flickered once, twice, and steadied like they were deciding to behave. The central clock showed 12:03, but his watch said 11:58. That wasn't new. The clock had been wrong for months. Still, something about the way the second hand stuttered mid-tick made his stomach turn just a little. He began his usual route mop bucket, trash bin, disinfectant wipes, the quiet company of machines that hummed when nobody else did. Each floor had its own personality. The first was social, bright, smelling like coffee. The second was nervous, full of students who studied through the night and whispered too much. But the third floor, that one was his, the quiet zone. Rows of reference books that hadn't been checked out in decades, maps of old cities, records of faculty meetings from years before he was born, and a corridor at the back short, narrow, ending in a blank wall, or at least it used to. At 2:33 a.m., pushing his cart past the encyclopedia stacks, Miguel stopped dead. The corridor didn't end in a wall anymore. He blinked. His mop handle hit the cart and echoed softly off the shelves. At the fair end, where there had always been nothing but faded paint, there was now a door, a wooden door, darker than the surrounding wall, its edges trimmed with old brass that caught the lamplight like it was breathing. The surface was smooth, unmarked, too clean for a building this old. And worse, it was glowing. Not like an electronic light, not like a bulb behind it, but with a faint amber warmth, as if someone had trapped the last bit of sunset in the grain of the wood. Miguel frowned. No, that wasn't there, he muttered. He knew this building better than anyone. He had waxed every inch, dusted every corner. That wall had been solid, just plaster and paint, cracked near the baseboard. He even remembered the scuff mark left by a student's rolling chair from last summer. But now that wall was gone. He looked around. Empty. Just books and silence. His first thought was renovation. Maybe maintenance had added something. But there were no work orders. No signs, no tools, and no smell of sawdust or new paint. He walked closer, shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor. The light from the overhead fixtures didn't quite reach the end of the corridor. The closer he got, the dimmer it felt, like the door was swallowing the brightness. When he was 3 feet away, he noticed something stranger. The door had no handle, just a keyhole, small, round, perfectly cut to perfect. It didn't belong to any modern lock. The metal around it was tarnished, almost green. He crouched, tilted his head. The keyhole wasn't black inside. It glowed faintly, the same amber as the wood, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. "Hello?" he said quietly. His voice came back wrong, slower, like an echo traveling through syrup. He felt the sound crawl back toward him, late and heavy. It brushed his ear like someone whispering from behind. Miguel's hand trembled. Maintenance. He tried again, louder. Nothing. He pulled out his phone. The signal bars blinked between 1 and none. The battery icon froze mid-blink. He turned on the flashlight. The beam seemed weaker here, struggling against the soft gold leaking from the door frame. He aimed it at the baseboard and froze again. The door didn't sit on the floorboards like a normal door. It grew from them. The seam between the bottom edge and the tile wasn't a line, it was an uneven ripple, as if the wood had melted out of the ground and hardened in place. Miguel stepped back. "Nope," he whispered. "Nope, not tonight." But something held him there. Some part of his mind trying to balance fear with curiosity. He'd seen odd things in old buildings before. Settling noises, false doors, misaligned panels, but this was alive in a way architecture wasn't supposed to be. He reached out with the handle of his mop and tapped the door once. It made a sound, not wood, not metal, but paper, the sound of pages shifting. Then from behind it came the faintest noise, a whisper, just a single breath shaped into syllables. He couldn't make out the words. It sounded like someone trying to remember a sentence. He took one more step forward. The light from the keyhole brightened slightly, as though it recognized his presence. And then he heard it, a child's voice, soft, calm, close. "Miguel, you're late." The mop handle slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor. The sound was swallowed almost instantly, as if the air itself refused to carry it. He backed up 2 steps, pulse racing, breath short. His eyes darted to the hallway, camera-dead red LED. No blink. He turned back toward the cart, planning to leave, maybe call security. But his radio on the cart crackled before he could reach it. A voice came through. Static, low, slow. Not his supervisor's. 3rd floor. Reading room. He grabbed the radio, pressed the button. "Who is this?" No response, just faint paper shuffling, and then the sound of a book closing. Hard, he looked back at the door. It was still there, warm light breathing softly through its seams. Then, as he watched, the brass plate above the frame began to shift, letters pressing themselves upward from underneath the surface like something writing from the inside. When it finished forming, he could barely read the engraved words in the glow. Catalog Room Access Restricted EST, 1913-1913, the founding year of the library. The same date on every cornerstone. Miguel swallowed hard. His flashlight flickered, then went out completely. The door creaked once, barely a sound, but enough for him to see a shadow move underneath, stretching long across the floor toward him like an arm reaching for help or invitation. He didn't move. He couldn't. The building felt like it was watching him, and somewhere in the silence, a page turned again. Miguel didn't remember deciding to move, but his feet did. One step forward, careful, another. The mop bucket behind him rippled once. Water inside, trembling like it heard something he didn't. He stopped an arm's length from the glowing wood. The air here wasn't cold or warm, it was different. It pressed against his skin the way humidity does before a storm, thick and patient. He raised his hand and let his fingers hover near the keyhole. The light inside the hole pulsed once, slow, as though recognizing a heartbeat. The pulse synced with his. He could feel it against his wrist. For a second he thought about leaving, about closing his eyes, walking back down the hall, pretending this was a trick of exhaustion. But then the voice from behind the door spoke again, quieter this time, closer, like someone whispering through cloth. "You can come in now." He froze. The sound didn't echo. It existed only in the inch of space between him and the door. It was calm, familiar, the kind of voice you hear in a memory you don't know you have. Miguel's throat went dry. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Someone you forgot." He didn't understand what that meant. He tried to step back, but the floor under him made a new sound, a creak too low, too soft, and yet it traveled up his legs like a warning. He looked down. The floor tiles near the base of the door weren't tile anymore. They looked like old library wood, darker, older, curling at the edges like paper left in the rain. His phone buzzed in his pocket, one sharp vibration. He pulled it out. The screen glowed dim amber, showing no apps, no text, only a single sentence floating in the center. Catalog entry found, room 3B. He blinked, and the words vanished. The phone went black again. When he looked up, the keyhole's light had widened into a slit, like an eye opening. He didn't hear any click. The door simply decided to unlock. It opened a few inches, quiet, smooth, deliberate. From inside came the smell of paper, cedar, and thyme. The light inside wasn't bright. It was the color of late afternoon in a room with curtains drawn, peaceful, almost beautiful. Miguel hesitated. Then, because curiosity was sometimes stronger than fear, he leaned forward and looked through the opening. At first he thought it was just another study room. Wooden tables, lamps, shelves. But there was something off about it. The shelves weren't in rows. They circled inward like rings of a tree. The room seemed small, but his eyes couldn't find the far wall. It was as if the shelves kept curving until they disappeared into themselves. And the books, they didn't look new or old. Their spines were blank. No titles, no numbers, no dust. Just smooth leather and cloth arranged so neatly it made his skin crawl. "Maintenance," he called softly, forcing his voice steady. "Anyone in there?" No reply. Only that same slow rustle of a page turning. He pushed the door open another inch and listened. The sound wasn't from a book, it was from many books, all moving at once, whispering against one another like leaves caught in a slow wind. "All right," he muttered. "I'll just check. Quick look, then call it in." He placed one foot across the threshold. Instantly, the air changed. The faint hum of the building, the distant vents, the faint buzz of lights vanished. Silence, total and thick, wrapped around him like water. Even his own breath sounded wrong, as though it was being filtered through glass. He stepped fully inside. The door didn't close. Not yet. It waited. The first thing he noticed was that the floor didn't echo. His boots met no sound. The wood felt softer, like walking on pages instead of planks. The lamps above the tables glowed with that same golden light, steady but heavy, like syrup hanging midair. Miguel turned a slow circle. Every table had a single open book on it. Each one looked identical cream-colored paper, neat handwriting that seemed too small and perfect to be human. The ink wasn't black or blue, but gray, like faded pencil lines that refused to fade completely. He leaned closer to one book. The page he saw made his stomach twist. It wasn't written in any language he knew. The letters were arranged in perfect lines, curved and joined like cursive, but each letter changed shape slightly when he tried to focus. It was like reading in a dream when the words slide away before you can remember them. He blinked hard, and suddenly, for just 1 second, the words made sense. They said, "Miguel Alvarez, custodian, entered at 2:36 a.m. He stumbled back, knocking the chair behind him. It didn't fall, it just stopped, mid-tilt, like time had paused long enough for him to look at what he'd done. No, he muttered, backing toward the door. I'm not, this isn't, but the room moved differently now. The air between the shelves shimmered like heat rising from pavement. The books closest to him began to hum quiet, low, like tuning forks. He turned toward the door and saw it had closed halfway. "Hey!" he shouted, rushing forward. It didn't slam. It didn't lock. It just existed closer than before, as if the room had pulled it. He grabbed the edge and tried to push, but it didn't move. The warm light seeped through his fingers like liquid sunlight. Then a voice came from behind him, closer than the shelves, closer than the air. "You shouldn't have stepped in yet." Miguel turned. Someone stood at the far end of the circular shelves, a man in a dark vest, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hands dusted with chalk or maybe paper ash. His face was wrong, not grotesque, just unfinished, like a sketch still waiting for details. The mouth was there, the eyes too, but when Miguel tried to focus, they blurred, as if the man existed between memories. "Who are you?" Miguel managed. The man smiled, or maybe the idea of a smile passed across him. "A librarian," he said gently. "Like you?" "I'm not," Miguel started, then stopped. He looked down at his hands, the glove on his right hand. He hadn't noticed its change was no longer rubber. It was soft white cotton, smudged with gray fingerprints. His reflection in the brass lamp beside him showed a collar, not his uniform, and around his neck, a small tag. He bent closer to see the text, heart pounding. The tag read, "Catalog Division, since 1913. His voice cracked. "That's not no. But the man across the room nodded once, slow. "We all say that the first time." The shelves behind him shifted subtle, like breathing. The books rearranged themselves, opening at random, pages fluttering without wind. The air vibrated with quiet, delicate movement, 1,000 soft sounds trying not to disturb each other. "Where am I?" Miguel whispered. The librarian tilted his head. "You're in the catalog, Miguel. The one that keeps what time forgets." Miguel took another step back, shaking his head. "No, I work here. I clean here. I don't belong in." But before he could finish, the lamp nearest him flickered and went out. Then another, then another. The golden glow pulled inward, converging near the center of the room, around Thedable where the first open book lay. From its pages rose a thin line of smoke that didn't rise, it curved, forming a loop, then another until it shaped a small, glowing ring hovering above the book. Inside that ring, letters began to appear, his name again, then the word, "pending." Miguel felt a pull not physical, but familiar, like gravity disguised as memory. The light from the ring reflected in his eyes, steady, patient, final. He reached for the book, trying to close it, to break whatever this was. His fingers touched the paper. It was warm, too warm. The moment he touched it, the pages turned on their own fast, furious, hundreds in seconds, whispering like a storm of secrets. The sound filled the room and the shelves joined in, books flipping open in unison, releasing a chorus of unread words that wrapped around him like 1,000 soft hands. He screamed, but the sound died before it left his mouth, and then silence again. The ring of light above the table dimmed once, twice, and vanished. When the lamp steadied again, the room was empty. The cart, the mop, his phone all gone. The door stood open just a crack, and from outside, the quiet hum of the building returned, ordinary, alive. On the table, the book lay closed. The cover, now labeled in gold Alvarez, Miguel completed entry. When Miguel opened his eyes again, the light had changed. It was no longer the soft gold of lamps, but the deep amber of a sun you never see rise. The room was bigger now, or maybe he was smaller. The walls stretched away into haze, the shelves curving outward in impossible geometry. He could still hear the whisper of pages, but it was slower, calmer, like breathing after panic. The air carried a faint hum that seemed to come from beneath the floor. He blinked and saw movement. The man in the vest stood a few feet away, placing a book carefully onto a table. He did it with reverence, like setting down something fragile, a heartbeat maybe. The man looked up, and this time his face almost stayed still, as if memory had decided to hold him steady long enough to speak. "You fainted," the man said quietly. "It happens to all of them." Miguel pushed himself up, the wood under his hands warm and strangely alive. Where am I?" The librarian smiled, patient. "You're still in the library," he said, "just not the one they built above." Miguel swallowed. "Below?" "Not quite." The librarian brushed imaginary dust from his hands. "Think of it as the first library, the one they copied without knowing." "That doesn't make sense," Miguel said, his voice shaking. "It's not supposed to," the man replied. "Not yet." Miguel stood, every muscle aching like he'd slept wrong for a year. He looked around, the shelves, the light, the air that shimmered faintly, like static before a storm. "I shouldn't be here. I just clean floors." "I don't," the librarian held up a hand. "That's why you're here." Miguel frowned. "What, people like you?" The librarian said softly, "are the keepers between the forgotten and their remembered. You clean away what others leave behind. You notice what no one else does. You look longer. And this place looks back when it's ready." Miguel's throat tightened. "Ready for what?" The librarian moved toward him. His footsteps made no sound. "To be written down." "I'm not dead," Miguel said quickly. "This is crazy. But the librarian interrupted. voice low and calm. Not yet, but you've been recorded. The moment you opened that door, your entry began. Miguel backed away. Entry? What are you talking about? The man gestured to the table beside them. A large open book lay there, its pages blank except for a faint shimmer near the top line. As Miguel watched, gray writing began to crawl across the surface, one letter at a time. It spelled his name again, Miguel Alvarez, followed by a date, a time, and then a line that seemed to write itself faster than any hand could move. He leaned closer. The line said, assigned to Maintenance Division, Catalog Preservation. What the hell is that? Miguel whispered. The librarian looked at him like a teacher might look at a student trying to grasp a painful truth. Everything that disappears from your world comes here. Every file deleted, every record lost, every name erased by mistake or time. The library keeps it. That's the rule. Miguel shook his head. I don't believe that. You don't have to, the man said gently. You're part of it now. He picked up a quill from the table. It wasn't old-fashioned exactly, just timeless. The tip glowed faintly like a dying ember. When you cleaned the third floor, you probably threw away things. Old reports, student forms, broken pens, receipts. None of it mattered, right? Miguel nodded hesitantly. The librarian smiled without humor. Everything matters here. Nothing leaves without a record. Every scrap of knowledge wants to be remembered by something, even if that something isn't human anymore. Miguel's chest tightened. So what am I supposed to do? The librarian handed him the quill. Finish your entry. Miguel stared at it. The feather felt heavy, heavier than metal, heavier than guilt. The tip pulsed faintly in rhythm with his heartbeat. I don't know what to write, he said. It will write itself, the librarian said. It always does once you hold it. Miguel hesitated. Then he took the quill. The instant he did, his hand moved without his permission. It traced small, careful lines across the blank page. The handwriting wasn't his, but the motion felt familiar, like muscle memory from a life he hadn't lived. Words began to appear. Miguel Alvarez, janitor, Hartwell Library, keeper of forgotten rooms. He dropped the quill. It clattered once, rolled toward the edge, then stopped just before falling. What does that mean? Forgotten rooms? The librarian folded his hands. Every building with enough memory begins to build its own spaces, places that exist only when someone needs to find them. Forgotten rooms are anchors between worlds. You found one. They always choose someone who notices the small things. Miguel felt dizzy. You're saying the library made a door? The librarian nodded once. And you opened it. That's the contract. I didn't agree to anything, Miguel shouted. The man's voice didn't rise. You looked. That was enough. Miguel turned toward the door. It was still there, closed now, but glowing faintly. Patient. Then let me go, he said. You can, the librarian said, but the door remembers your name now. Once written, name stay. You can leave this room, but the library will still keep your shadow. I don't want that, Miguel whispered. No one does, the man said, almost kindly. But everything you forget becomes part of someone else's remembering. It's balance. Miguel ran a hand through his hair. This is insane. The librarian tilted his head. Maybe, but think about this. How many times have you walked into a room and felt like someone had just left, or smelled perfume that shouldn't be there, or seen light where no lamp was on? That's not imagination, Miguel. That's the places trying to recall their missing pages. Miguel looked around the endless shelves. And you keep them? We keep everything, the librarian said. But someone has to clean, organize, maintain. That's where you come in. No, Miguel said. No, I'm not staying here. He started toward the door again. But when he touched the knob this time, it was cold, colder than ice. The wood around it trembled slightly, like breathing under his palm. The librarian's voice followed him, soft but near. You'll find the way back if you still remember where the exit is. Miguel yanked the door open. The light from the other side was harsh, white, familiar. He stepped through, dragging in a breath that felt like waking up from drowning. The library looked normal again. The same desks, the same lamps, the same clock that hadn't moved past 2:36. The corridor behind him was empty. The wall where the door had been was just that, a gyna wall. Smooth, blank, no seams, no glow. He turned in a circle, heart racing, eyes wide. Everything was normal, too normal. Then his phone buzzed again in his pocket. He pulled it out, shaking. The lock screen showed the time, 3:07 a.m., and below the time, where his notifications usually were, a single message glowed. Catalog update, 1 entry completed. He stared at it. The message vanished. He looked at his reflection in the dark library window. He looked the same except for one small thing. The name tag on his shirt wasn't the same as before. The words had shifted slightly, letters thinner, faded. It now read, M. Alvarez Catalog Division. Morning always fixed things. That's what Miguel told himself when the sunrise crept through his curtains like a gentle apology. He'd only slept an hour. The rest of the night had been long stretches of staring at this ceiling, trying to remember whether he'd really seen what he thought he saw, if exhaustion had built a hallucination out of cleaning chemicals and shadows. By 9 a.m., the world outside his window had already forgotten the night. Buses rumbled, radios hummed, kids laughed on sidewalks. The air smelled of asphalt and bakery steam. Everything normal, everything too normal. He sat at his small kitchen table, coffee cooling untouched, scrolling through his phone. No messages, no notifications. The time on the lock screen flicked forward from 9:13 to 9:14. The screen glowed steady white. Nothing strange. Still, his chest buzzed like it was holding a secret. The name tag on the counter caught his eye. M. Alvarez Catalog Division. He picked it up. The letters weren't printed anymore. They were pressed into the plastic like they'd always been that way. He ran a thumb over the grooves, feeling each line sink into the material. It wasn't new. It was old. He told himself he must have remembered wrong. Maybe it always said that. Maybe his mind was just making connections. It shouldn't. Still, by noon, he was standing outside the Hartwell Library again. The building looked harmless in daylight. The sandstone facade caught the sun in warm tones. Students came and went through the main doors, dragging laptops and backpacks, their conversations bouncing off the glass like echoes from another world. Miguel scanned their faces. None of them knew what the place became after midnight. Inside, everything was louder. Printers hummed, keyboards clacked, air vents hissed. The third floor was open now. Students filled the tables, whispering, flipping pages, lost in deadlines. Miguel climbed the stairs slowly. Each step groaned under his weight, the sound dragging along like memory. He nodded to the desk clerk, who waved half distractedly, not even looking up from her screen. He reached the third floor and stopped. The corridor stretched ahead, the same one as last night, clean, ordinary blank. The wall where the door had been stood smooth and solid. Beige paint, brass-framed floor plan mounted dead center. Miguel stared. His hands felt cold. He walked closer, slow, quiet, careful not to draw looks. The map was still there. He leaned in. Every line was the same: reading room, stacks, staff office, elevator. No catalog room. Nothing at the end of the hall but a drawn rectangle labeled structural wall. He tapped the glass lightly. A faint echo came back. He tapped again. The echo came later this time, as though the sound had to travel farther than the wall should have allowed. He frowned, leaned closer. His reflection stared back, tired eyes, gray uniform, name tag catching the overhead light. Then he saw it. For less than a second, the reflection behind him changed. Where the wall should have been, there was the door, faint, glowing, its brass plate barely visible before it flickered out again, like a dream leaving no trace. He spun around. Just the wall. Someone at a nearby desk looked up. Miguel forced a nod, pretended to be checking the frame for dust, and moved on. But his heart was hammering now. It hadn't been a dream. He went back downstairs. The building's main office was quiet except for the sound of a copier chewing paper. Behind the counter sat Diane, the building secretary, a woman who knew every renovation, every request, every form ever filed. "Hey, Diane," he said, trying to sound casual. She smiled. "Miguel, you're in early." "Yeah, I wanted to ask something. You remember any new work done up on the third floor recently?" She pushed her glasses up, tapping at her computer. "Third floor? No, not since they replaced the carpet last fall." "Why?" He hesitated. "I saw something weird. Thought maybe maintenance put up a door or something." "A door?" She frowned. "You mean the storage closet by the north stacks?" "No, end of the south corridor. Past the old blueprints map?" Diane blinked. "Miguel, there's no door there." "There never was." "I know, but..." She tilted her head. "You sure you're not thinking of the archives sublevel? There's a locked room down there. Old catalog stuff." That word made his chest tighten. "Catalog?" "Yeah," she said. "It's not used anymore. They digitized everything years ago. It's sealed now, construction hazard or something. Nobody's allowed in. Where is it? Sub-basement. You can't get to it without the old elevator key. Facilities keeps it." She smiled like it was small talk. "Why, you find treasure?" He forced a laugh, pretending it was a joke. "Yeah, something like that." When he left her desk, he felt eyes on him. He looked back once Diane had gone still, staring at her monitor, lips moving slightly like she was whispering numbers. He didn't ask. He just left. The basement elevator was old steel doors, tarnished buttons, the kind that groaned when they opened. The lowest listed floor was B1. He turned his keyring over. The master keys jingled softly. The smallest one, the one he hadn't used in years, had no label, just an etched number, 1913. He pressed it into the keyhole under the control panel. The light beside the B1 button flickered, then changed. A new button glowed faintly below it. No text, just a blank space, shining faint amber. Miguel's stomach flipped. He pressed it. The elevator began to move down, slower than it should, the sound like an organ breathing. The walls creaked. The light overhead dimmed to a golden hue. He tried to breathe steady. Just maintenance, he whispered. Just maintenance. After what felt like a full minute, the elevator stopped. The doors opened. Darkness, not pitch black, just a dim corridor stretching forward lined with brick, the kind built before electricity. The air smelled of dust and rain trapped for decades. A single lamp burned at the far end, throwing trembling shadows against the walls. Miguel stepped out. The elevator doors closed behind him with a sigh. No button to reopen. He moved forward slowly, footsteps echoing soft against the concrete floor. The sound reminded him of the first night of pages turning somewhere nearby. At the end of the corridor, a wooden archway stood. Above it, a metal sign eaten by rust read, Catalog Archives. He swallowed hard. There was a door there too, but this one wasn't new. It was old splintered, warped, the brass handle tarnished to green. Still, it glowed faintly under the surface, the same color as the one he'd seen upstairs. He reached out. The metal under his fingers felt alive. Behind the door, something moved. A shuffle, a chair scraping wood, the faint thud of a book being placed carefully on a table. He backed up a step. The sound stopped. Then, softly from behind the wood, back already, it was the librarian's voice. Calm, kind, patient. Miguel's breath caught. "What do you want from me?" The answer came through like wind through old paper. "You left before we finished writing." He turned toward the elevator. There was no door anymore, just solid wall. The only light came from the brass keyhole in front of him, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat waiting for its next page. Miguel stood in front of the door for a long time, afraid to touch it, afraid not to. The brass keyhole throbbed softly, each pulse matching the beat in his wrists. The sound behind eyed a faint scrape. A page turning came and went like breathing through walls. He swallowed hard, wiped sweat from his palms, and pressed the old key, the one marked 1913, into the lock. It turned without effort, as though it had been waiting for his hand all this time. The door sighed open. A warm breath of air rolled out, smelling of cedar, old glue, and faint electricity. Inside was darkness, but not empty darkness. It was the kind that has texture, the kind filled with shapes hiding just beneath what your eyes can bear to see. He stepped in. The floor creaked, but softly, like the wood knew his weight already. The room stretched wide, larger than any basement should be. The ceiling arched into blackness. Bookshelves curved along the walls, each one overfilled with tomes that leaned and pressed against each other like weary bodies. Dust floated through the light, catching golden specks that pulsed faintly as they passed. Miguel raised his flashlight. The beam barely reached 10 feet before it faded into haze. It wasn't fog, it was paper dust so thick it felt alive. He took another step, and the air changed again. A hum filled the space, faint but everywhere, vibrating through his shoes, through his bones. The books were whispering, not with words, but with the quiet friction of pages shifting on their own, small movements rippling shelf to shelf. In the far corner, a lamp burned steady and low. Beneath it sat a wooden desk, the kind you'd find in an old university registrar's office, broad, heavy, carved with initials from people who'd forgotten they'd ever been young. On the desk rested an open ledger the size of a door. Its pages glowed faintly gold. He approached slowly. His reflection swam across the desk's lacquered surface, broken bismal ripples of light. The ledger's handwriting looked familiar, perfect gray ink, small even, human but not human enough. Names filled the pages, hundreds of them, each line the same. Entry accepted. Status remembered. He flipped to the next page. More names. The ink shimmered faintly, as if still drying after decades. He stopped when he saw his own. Alvarez Miguel, custodian, entered twice. Status, pending review. His stomach dropped. Twice? He whispered. The room answered. Some people can't decide which side they belong to. The voice was calm, close. He looked up. The librarian was there, again, same vest, same smudged hands, same blurred face that refused to stay in focus. He was standing in the lamp's glow, sorting through a small pile of cards that looked like library catalog entries. Miguel's pulse kicked. How are you here?" The librarian smiled, eyes shifting like reflections in glass. "I never left." "Neither did you." Miguel shook his head. "No, I went home. I woke up." Did you?" the librarian asked softly. He tilted one of the cards toward the light. On it, Miguel saw his own handwriting, the note he'd written months ago for a lost book request. Cleaning staff found this behind reference section C. The date printed at the top wasn't from months ago. It was from tomorrow. Miguel stumbled backward. "This isn't real." "It's real enough," the librarian said. He stepped forward, motion smooth, weightless. "This is the part of the library where time is corrected. Every missing record, every deleted line, every story someone tried to erase ends here. You entered twice because you tried to forget something twice. I don't understand." "Of course not," the librarian said. "Memory and dust have the same problem. They don't stay where you put them." Miguel rubbed his temples. The hum in the floor grew stronger. Shelves trembled slightly, books shifting in unison. "I just want to leave." The librarian studied him for a moment, then nodded toward the ledger. "You can, but you must sign it properly this time. Every name in that book belongs to someone who walked out of their story and forgot to close the door behind them. We just file the paperwork. He gestured to a chair opposite the desk. It scraped the floor slightly as if inviting him. Miguel didn't sit. What happens if I don't? The librarian shrugged. Then the story keeps writing itself without you. People will still remember you, but not clearly. They'll say things like, he worked here for a while, didn't they? Or, didn't he move away? You'll exist only in half sentences. It's a kinder kind of disappearance, but still a disappearance. The lamp's light pulsed once. The shelves groaned. A few books slipped out and landed open on the floor. Their pages turned by themselves, stopping at entries Miguel couldn't quite read. The handwriting blurred and shimmered. I don't want to disappear, Miguel said quietly. Then sign your name, the librarian said. Miguel picked up the quill. The same heavy feather as before. It pulsed faintly, waiting. Hovered it over the page that bore his name. The ink bled up into the tip. Ready. He wrote slowly, his letters shaky. M. Alvarez. When he lifted the quill, the words underneath rearranged themselves. Status, active custodian. He exhaled. That's it. The librarian nodded. For now. Miguel stared at him. What do you mean for now? The man smiled faintly. Every record needs maintenance. Before Miguel could ask, the floor vibrated again gently, rhythmically, like the thrum of a heartbeat shared between stone and wood. A deep bell-like tone echoed through the walls, soft but endless. He looked around. The shelves shifted again, and as they did, he saw small glimmers between them. Figures, silhouettes, faint human shapes made of paper and light standing in silence, each holding a book to their chest. They weren't ghosts. They were memories. The forgotten ones, catalogued and waiting. Some looked like old librarians. Others looked like janitors, students, professors. All of them shimmered faintly gold at the edges. What are they? Miguel whispered. Filed records, the librarian said simply. Every lost thing deserves someone to remember it. One of the figures stepped closer. It was faint, almost transparent. A woman holding a mop handle like a cane. Her face was kind, familiar. Miguel blinked, heart hammering. Mom? The librarian watched quietly. The woman smiled, faint but real. Then she nodded once, lips parting to say something, but no sound came. Her image flickered like candlelight, then folded into the air like a page being turned. Miguel stepped forward. Wait! But she was gone. The librarian's voice softened. She worked here once, too. We all do, eventually. Every caretaker leaves something behind worth keeping. Miguel's hands shook. I don't want to stay here. Then keep cleaning, the librarian said. That's all remembering is keeping things clear long enough for light to find them. The hum grew louder. The lamp flickered. The ledger's glow faded to steady gray. Miguel blinked. The air shifted, pressure building in his ears like a storm about to break. He turned toward the door and saw it had changed again. No longer old or splintered. No, it was clean, smooth, and new, like the one upstairs. The brass plate above it gleamed softly. Catalog room staff access only. The librarian's voice followed as he reached for the handle. If it closes behind you, don't open it again. It means the page is finished. Miguel looked back. Will I remember this? The man smiled. Only the parts that belong to you. Miguel stepped through. The door closed with a sound like a book snapping shut. He found himself standing in the regular basement again, concrete floor. Humming lights, faint smell of bleach. His flashlight was still in his hand. The clock on his phone said 3:47 a.m. He stood there for a long minute, breathing hard, before finally walking back to the elevator. The panel inside now showed only one button. He pressed it. As the doors closed, he saw the brass plate on the wall behind him. It had always been there, he told himself. Always. But the engraved words caught the light one last time before the elevator carried him up. Hartwell Library Est in 1913. We keep what you forget. By the time the sun tilted across the library windows, the building looked like it always had. But it wasn't the same. Miguel felt it first, the way a person feels a storm before the clouds arrive. The air held a slow pressure, not heavy, just deliberate. Each step across the third-floor carpet seemed Toland on a pattern he couldn't see. He pushed his cart in a straight line, but its wheels drifted a little toward the south corridor, like a compass needle refusing to forget north. He told himself to work. Trash cans, tabletops, sanitizer, the endless rhythm that kept other people's mess from turning into forgetfulness. Work had always been the thing that made sense, but the world had shifted by degrees, and work noticed. The first proof came small. A book left on table 12, thin, red, stamped with Hartwell Special Collections in faded gold. He lifted it to put it on the reshelving cart. The book was warm, not from a hand, warm like a pocket that remembers a person. He glanced at the title, Facilities Log, Interim Records. Facilities? In Special Collections? He frowned and opened it. The pages were neat, typed, cataloged by date. He found last week, then yesterday, then tonight. The entry was short, 2:36 a.m. Custodian M. Alvarez accessed sub-basement catalog. Entry accepted. Status, active. He closed the book fast, pulse in his throat, looked around. No one was watching. The students were gone now. Only the lamps watched with green patience. He turned the pages again, hands shaking. The line about him was still there. He shut the cover, slid the book under his cart rag, and told himself he wouldn't think about it until he finished the floor. He made it 6 steps. Then the second proof found him. At the end of the stacks, a framed floor plan hung in its usual place. Beige outline, black labels, reading room, reference, staff office, mechanical. Miguel had memorized those letters like a prayer against confusion. Today the glass caught the light differently. He wiped it with his cloth. The map underneath wavered, like a picture printed on water. For a heartbeat, a thin line appeared at the south end, a rectangle of darker shade, where the corridor should end in a wall. A door print beneath the print. The shape vanished when he blinked. He lifted the frame. The back panel was sealed shut by 4 small screws. He knew because he had opened it last winter to dust behind it. He had replaced the screws himself. He looked for the scuffs he'd left. They were gone. The metal heads were smooth, unmarked, as if Noon had ever touched them. He took a step back, breath thin, then heard the subtle metal click that old buildings make when they want you to listen. A faint draft feathered down the corridor. Not cold, not warm, just a breath. Not now, he whispered. Please. The corridor stayed a corridor. The wall stayed a wall. He forced himself to finish the floor. The mop water cooled. The trash bags tied neat knots he didn't remember learning. He collected the last armful of abandoned printouts, formulas, a half-finished bibliography, someone's draft that used the word liminal too many times. He dropped them in the rolling bin. Paper whispered against paper. When he reached the staff room to clock his break, Diane sat alone with her mug, staring at nothing. She smiled when she saw him, but the smile missed its timing, like it was remembering what to do. You're early, she said. It's late, he answered, then flushed. The clock on the wall read 4:11. His watch said 4:11. The hands agreed for once. Diane stirred her coffee without clinking the spoon. You hear about the leak in Sub B? He froze. Sub B? Maintenance sent an email, she said. Flood sensors went off, then stopped. False alarm, probably. That part of the building always complains. Which part? She shrugged. The old catalog wing. Her eyes flicked up at him like she'd heard herself say it. Sorry, I mean the old archives. We don't have catalog rooms anymore. He swallowed. Right. She took a sip, winced. This is cold. She stood, walked to the sink, poured it out. Her hands trembled just once, like a small aftershock. Miguel? She said without turning around, voice low. Do I know you? He stared at her back. What? She set the empty mug down slow. Sorry, that came out wrong. She turned, smiled again. Better this time. Long night. I meant, do you ever feel like the building is, I don't know, reshelving us? He didn't answer. He couldn't. She waved it off. Ignore me. I'm tired. She rinsed her mug and left. When the door swung shut, the room exhaled. The fluorescent light hummed. The refrigerator sputtered once like a small engine deciding to live. Miguel leaned both hands on the counter. His reflection in the microwave door looked older by a winter he hadn't lived yet. He dug the red book from under his rag and opened to his entry again. The letters had softened, like ink that had settled into the page after deciding to stay forever. He flipped back. Names he knew, old coworkers. A supervisor from 5 years ago. A security guard who'd retired before Miguel started. Their lines ended with the same 2 words. Status, remembered. Some had dates that didn't match reality. A few had no dates at all. He found a name he didn't expect. Alvarez Marta, his mother. The dates matched nothing. Assigned, temporary custodial support. Status, remembered with condition. He shut the book. The air tasted like old pennies. When he returned to the 3rd floor, the tables had rearranged themselves by an inch. Nothing anyone else would see. Places that used to be walking lanes had become pauses. He navigated without thinking. His feet knew the new map before his mind did. At table 7, a girl had left her laptop open to a scanned article for a paper. The title at the top read, Invisible Labor and the Architecture of Memory. He didn't mean to read the first paragraph, but his eyes kept going. The author described how buildings remember the people who maintain them, how dust forms around absence, how certain doors appear to those who keep things. It was an academic paper with too many citations. It should have felt abstract. But in the second paragraph, the author mentioned Hartwell by name. He froze. Read the sentence again. In Hartwell Library, 1913, records suggest one custodian became part of a catalog division that did not officially exist, performing memory maintenance in rooms not shown on blueprints. His hands went cold. He checked the author's name. It was a grad student he'd emptied trash for last semester. He turned the laptop toward the light. Under the title, a line had been added in a lighter gray. Acknowledgements, M.A., after-hours tour. He hadn't given any tours. He didn't talk to students. He didn't tell anyone anything. But the letters looked like they had always been there. He backed away, heart loud. Didn't touch anything for a full minute. Breathed like a man trying not to wake a sleeping house. In the far corner, the wall glass that held the floor plan clouded from the inside. He walked toward it slowly, expecting a trick of air. The condensation drew shapes on its own. Not circles, not random. Letters. They formed one line before fading. We keep what you forget. He pressed his palm to the glass. It felt warm, like a forehead after a fever. Footsteps approached behind him. He turned, ready to apologize to no one. The librarian stood at the corridor's end. Not invest in dust this time. In a modern cardigan, staff badge clipped to his pocket. The name on it read J. Harrow Catalog in a font that belonged to today. His face still refused to hold still. It flickered between versions like a radio crossing stations. Miguel's throat tightened. You said not to open the door if it closed behind me. It did, Harrow said, voice steady. This isn't that door. This is your floor, your route. I'm just walking in it. He glanced at the plan. You feel it, don't you? The rewrite. Miguel nodded, small and helpless. Good, Harrow said. Edits mean survival. Buildings must adapt to hold what people drop. I don't want to be dropped, Miguel said, surprising himself with the raw sound of it. Harrow looked at him for a long breath. Then stay useful. He tapped the cart. Tonight you'll find 3 items that don't belong. You'll be tempted to throw them away. Don't. Put them in the red book. He paused. And when someone says your name from behind a wall, don't answer on the first call. Why? Because the first call is for the missing. The second is for the working. Decide which one you are. Miguel swallowed, nodded. When he looked up again, Harrow was gone. Not vanished, just not there. As if the aisle had always been empty. He checked his watch. 5:02. An hour to closing. The building thinned as students left. Has started his last sweep, eyes sharp for the 3 things that didn't belong. He found them like his hands had known the map already. Item 1. A metal library date stamp from the 1970s, ink pad dried to a bruise. He found it in the poetry section, tucked between 2 slim volumes that smelled like laundry and rain. He wouldn't have noticed it if it hadn't been warm. He placed it on the red book without opening the cover. The book sighed like a drawer sliding shut. Item 2. A key tied to a tag that read 3B in pencil, faded almost to ash. He found it under a radiator that hadn't worked in years. It rang faintly against his skin when he lifted it. He placed it on the red book. The gold on the cover brightened and then fell back to sleep. Item 3. A photograph lying face down near the elevators. He turned it over and saw himself on the front steps of Hartwell, holding a book like a shield. The stone banister scrape lined up with his memory exactly. But the date in the corner said 1975, and the person whose arm rested on his shoulder wasn't born for another 2 decades. He placed the photo on the red book. The cover grew warmer than his hand. He closed the cart, locked the supply closet, finished the route. The lamps dimmed one by one until the quiet made rooms out of shadows. He stood at the head of the south corridor, stared at the blank wall, and waited without admitting he was waiting. At 5:59, the wall stayed a wall. At 6:00, the building clicked. At 6:01, the wall breathed. A faint seam appeared, then softened, then vanished. No door, no glow. Just the knowledge in his ribs that something on the other side had heard him not answer. He signed out at the desk. Diane waved with a face that held all its details this time. Night, Miguel, she said. See you tomorrow. Night, he said. He touched the name tag on his chest, feeling the grooves with his thumb. It felt right there, heavy, earned. Outside, dawn made the stone look young again. He stood on the steps and stared at the carved year above the door. 2013. He breathed in the smell of wet ivy and old air, and the phrase rose in his mind like a page floating back to the top of a stack. We keep what you forget. He didn't know if it was a comfort or a warning, but when the wind moved through the hedges, it sounded like pages turning, and he decided he would stay useful a little longer. He turned, went home, and slept like a man with a job only he could do. The night it called his name, Miguel almost didn't hear it. The vacuum's soft hum drowned out everything, the sighing vents, the distant shuffle of paper, the creak of the old air ducts above the archive wing. He was cleaning the second-floor hallway when the power flickered once, hard enough to make the vacuum motor hiccup. The light steadied, but the silence that followed felt like a held breath. He thought it was just the building settling. Old places groaned when they remembered what they used to be. Then, faintly, so faintly he almost mistook it for his own thought, someone whispered his name. Miguel. He froze. The sound came from far down the corridor where the stairwell ended, and the locked door to the sub-basement waited behind a staff-only sign. The voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even loud. It was careful, like someone testing the shape of his name before saying it right. He stood still for a long second, hand hovering over the vacuum switch. Then he did what any man working the night shift in a half-empty library does. He pretended he hadn't heard it. He turned off the vacuum, unplugged it, and started rolling the cord. His heartbeat filled the hallway. The voice came again, this time closer. Miguel. Not a question, not a call for help. Just a quiet invitation that didn't belong to any mouth he could imagine. He turned toward the stairwell and saw nothing but the faint golden light that always leaked from under the basement door, a light that wasn't supposed to be there, since that floor hadn't had working power in decades. He told himself it was probably Diane, maybe stuck downstairs again checking the old sensors. He walked to the stairwell, his shoes whispering against the tile. Each step downward made the air heavier, like water thickening around his chest. The smell hit him before the sound, that old scent of damp paper and faint ozone, like lightning hiding behind the walls. At the bottom, the light under the sub-basement door pulsed once, then faded. He reached for the handle. It was warm. He hesitated. That's when the voice came again, softer now, almost inside his head. Miguel, come help. It was the same tone the librarian used the first time, polite, calm, coaxing. The kind of voice people trust before they think. He stepped closer. His hand brushed the brass handle, and then he remembered the warning. When someone calls your name from behind a wall, don't answer on the first call. His heart stumbled. He stepped back. The silence after that was deep enough to hear the sound of the blood in his ears. The door seemed to listen with him. Then, as if on cue, the voice came again, louder, clearer. Miguel! He swallowed. That was the second call. He reached for the handle and turned it. The door didn't open the way doors open in the world above. It didn't swing or creak or shift in hinges. It just folded away, like paper dissolving in water, until there was only the stairwell light spilling into a space that shouldn't exist. The air inside glowed faintly gold, the same color as the ledger had been. Shelves stretched into the dark, curving in impossible shapes, like they'd been built by memory rather than hands. Each shelf was filled with books that hummed softly, pages turning without touch. And there, in the center, stood the librarian, Mr. Harrow, the one with the voice that never fit his face. Good, he said quietly. You answered on time. Miguel stepped in, heartbeat shaking his arms. You said not to. The first call isn't for you, Harrow interrupted gently. The second is. The first one checks who's still listening. Miguel looked around. The room felt wider than before, stretching in all directions at once. He saw familiar items scattered across the tables, the same date stamp, the same old photograph, even the red ledger lying open as though it had never closed. But something was new. A chair at the far end of the room was turned away from him and someone sat in it. Harrow nodded toward the chair. That's why you're here. Miguel's throat tightened. Who is that? Someone who answered on the first call. The figure in the chair moved slowly. Its head turned not all the way, just enough for Miguel to see a profile. The skin looked pale, like paper soaked and dried again. The eyes weren't eyes anymore. They were the same color as the light that filled the room, gold, soft, and endless. He took a step back. What happened to them? They remembered too much, Harrow said, and forgot the wrong thing. The chair creaked. The figure raised a hand, palm out, fingers thin and stiff as if they'd been drawn instead of born. The air around Miguel shifted heavier, quieter, like a book closing around him. I didn't call you here to scare you, Harrow said, his tone almost kind. I called you because you're the only one still keeping this place clean. Miguel looked at him. Clean? Yes. Harrow smiled, and for a moment his face almost looked solid. Do you know what dust really is? Miguel didn't answer. It's not dirt, Harrow continued softly. It's memory. All the tiny things people forget: skin cells, hair, paper fibers, little fragments of what mattered once. The building collects them. We organize them. You've been doing it without knowing. I don't want to do this. Of course you don't, Harrow said. No one does. But you're good at it. You keep the lines straight. You return the lost things. You keep the forgotten alive. The figure in the chair shifted again. The sound it made was like paper tearing underwater. Miguel stepped back toward the door. Harrow's voice deepened. If you leave now, it won't follow you. Not tonight, but you'll start to fade. The people upstairs, they'll stop remembering your face. The sign-in sheets will lose your name. Your locker will hold a coat no one claims. That's how the library forgets. Miguel's voice cracked. And if I stay? Then you'll keep your shape, Harrow said. You'll work between both floors, the living and the recorded. You'll remember what the others lose. And someday, when the next one answers, you'll teach them what I taught you. The golden light pulsed through the shelves. The books whispered, pages fluttering like wings. Miguel's hand brushed the red ledger. It was open to his name again. The ink shimmered, faintly. Status, active custodian. He looked at the figure in the chair one more time. It didn't move. It didn't blink. But when the light shifted, he thought he saw his own shadow inside its shape, same shoulders, same outline, same tremor in the fingers. He looked at Harrow. Will I remember this? Harrow smiled faintly. You'll remember enough. The lights dimmed. The hum of the shelves softened into silence. Miguel took a slow step backward toward the stairwell, his heart sinking with the low pulse of the floor beneath him. And when he crossed the threshold, the door folded closed. No sound, no motion. Just gone, like the moment between words when silence becomes story. Upstairs, the lights flickered once more. The vacuum cord lay coiled neatly, though he didn't remember putting it away. His hands smelled faintly of dust and ink. He looked back down the stairwell. No light glowed beneath the door. No sound followed him. Only a faint echo, one he might have imagined whispering the phrase he'd been hearing all along. We keep what you forget. He nodded once, half in fear, half in surrender. Then he turned off the lights, locked the janitor's closet, and walked out into the quiet night. The rain had started again. For 3 nights, Miguel didn't go near the basement door. He stayed upstairs, pushing his cart through aisles that hummed quietly, pretending the world made sense again. But libraries remember patterns, and old buildings have better memories than people. By the fourth night, something had changed. The sound came first, not a voice, not exactly. It was a blend of hundreds, a hum that wavered just below hearing. When he turned his head, it stopped. When he moved again, it followed. At first he thought it was the air vents. Then he realized the vents weren't running. He was shelving books in the history aisle when the whisper thickened into shape. "Do you remember me?" He froze. The air shifted behind him, faint warmth brushing his neck like someone standing too close. He turned. Nothing but shelves. He pushed the cart faster, wheels squealing on tile. The sound followed him, soft, gentle, constant. When he reached the end of the aisle, the whisper came again, this time closer, this time clearer. "Miguel, it's okay. You can listen now." The voice was his, not a copy, not an echo. His own tone, same breath, same tired tremor, the voice he heard every night when he muttered to himself before sleep. He backed into the wall, heartbeat a drum in his throat. "Who's there?" "You are," the voice said. He wanted to laugh. He couldn't. The sound stuck somewhere between breath and memory. The light above him flickered twice, then steadied, and all along the shelves, small golden threads began to unspool from between the books, thin, glowing lines like cobwebs made of light. They moved with sound, vibrating when the air changed, humming softly when he breathed. He reached out, hesitant, and one brushed his wrist. It was warm. The hum filled his head, and for a second, the library vanished. He was somewhere else, standing on the street outside Hartwell, rain falling hard, headlights bleeding through fog. A woman in a gray coat waved from across the street. His mother, Marta. She was smiling, but her mouth didn't move. The sound that reached him wasn't her voice, it was his, younger, calling her name. He blinked and he was back in the library. The thread drifted upward, vanishing into the ceiling like smoke. He stumbled backward, heart racing. What was that? "The archive," his own voice whispered from somewhere near the stairs. "The library keeps the echoes. Every memory that gets lost leaves a sound behind." He turned toward the stairwell. The door was open, not wide, just enough for the same faint golden light to spill out like breath from a sleeping giant. He should have run. He knew that. But curiosity has its own gravity, and he had already stepped too close to stop now. He descended slowly. The air cooled with each step. By the time he reached the bottom, the hum had turned into something deeper, hundreds of overlapping whispers, words layered and blurred, forming a steady pulse that filled the entire space. The sub-basement was alive. The shelves moved, not with wind, but with intention. Books shifted positions, pages fluttering open like lungs. Every time a whisper rose louder than the rest, one of the golden threads thickened, descending from the ceiling to touch a specific book, as if connecting voice to memory. Miguel walked between the shelves, unable to stop himself. Each time he passed a thread, fragments of voices brushed against him, unfinished sentences, laughter cut short, the soft sigh of people who had once been here. He stopped beside one that glowed brighter than the rest. It vibrated softly, the pitch matching his heartbeat. He raised a hand and touched it. The world unfolded again. He saw the janitor's closet upstairs, his own hands folding a mop, his reflection flickering in the metal sink. Then the image shifted. The same closet, older now. The walls cracked, the labels on the bottles faded to dust. And in the reflection, not him, another custodian, face different but uniform the same. The man looked up, saw something behind him, and whispered, "It's still ringing." Miguel stepped back, heart hammering. "What's still ringing?" The voice that answered wasn't his. It came from the thread itself, 1,000 echoes woven together into one line. The bell. He froze. What bell? The hum deepened, vibrating through the floor. The light in the room flickered like a candle trapped in glass. Then, far above, faint but real, a single bell rang. Once, the sound rolled down through the ceiling. Soft but endless. It wasn't a church bell. It wasn't any bell he'd ever heard. It was the sound of time bending, of memory being pulled taut until it trembled. The golden threads swayed with it, each one resonating with the tone. Books began to whisper louder, their pages trembling, words trying to rearrange themselves. "It's calling," his voice whispered again. "Who is?" Miguel shouted. "The one who writes the endings." The hum stopped. Everything went still. The silence after that was so thick, he could hear the tiny crackle of the light above him, cooling. Then a book fell off the nearest shelf. It hit the floor, spine first, opening to the middle. He crouched, breath short, and read the first line that met his eyes. Custodian. Monsieur Alvarez, status. Listening. The ink shimmered, faintly gold. He turned the page. Status. Answering. A drop of something. Dark landed on the corner of the paper. He looked up. The ceiling above him wasn't a ceiling anymore. It was a reflection, a perfect mirror of the room, and in it he saw himself standing upside down, staring back. The reflection raised a hand, his hand, but it wasn't in sync. The reflection's movements came half a second too late. The bell rang again, softer now, but closer, and from the reflection's mouth, his voice came one more time, distant, distorted, but unmistakably him. The story is almost done. Keep it clean. He dropped the book. It slammed shut, echoing through the room like thunder. The golden thread snapped back into the shelves, one by one, until only a single strand remained, hovering above the fallen book, glowing like a heartbeat left behind. He turned toward the stairs, trembling, ready to run, but at the top, the librarian waited. Harrow's expression was calm, almost proud. "You heard them," he said. "Good. The building speaks to those who earn its silence." Miguel's voice cracked. "What's the bell?" Harrow looked up toward the ceiling where the sound had faded. "It's the alarm. Every story in here needs maintenance. When one starts to break apart, the bell calls the custodian. The archives don't fix themselves." Miguel shook his head, chest tight. "I'm not your custodian." Harrow smiled faintly. "Then why do you keep coming back?" The light flickered once more. When Miguel looked around again, the sub-basement was empty. No threads, no hum, no librarian. Only the faint smell of rain, and one last echo hanging in the stillness, his own voice, looping softly from somewhere inside the shelves. "We keep what you forget." He whispered the words back like a promise, or maybe like a prayer. The light dimmed. The room sighed, and somewhere deep within the walls, the bell waited for its next note. The bell started ringing again on a Tuesday, quiet at first, then clearer each night after. It didn't sound like metal. It sounded like something inside him being struck. Miguel woke up from a dream where every sound was a bell. The hum of the refrigerator, the drip of the sink, the click of the clock, all of them hollowed into that same deep tone. He thought it would stop when he got to work. It didn't. The first time it happened at Hartwell, no one else noticed. The students typed. The printers hummed. The fluorescent lights buzzed their lazy rhythm. But beneath all that, under the normal, something pure kept resonating. He could feel it in the soles of his shoes, that low vibration, like a heartbeat beneath the floor. When he leaned against the janitor's closet sink, the sound came through the pipes. When he closed his eyes, it traveled through his chest, aligning with his pulse until he couldn't tell which was which. By midnight, the ringing wasn't faint anymore. It had become steady. He tried to ignore it, tried to tell himself that buildings creak, machines hum, people imagine. But this wasn't in the air. It was in the silence between breaths. The bell was calling again. He followed it down the hallway. The walls seemed longer tonight. The exit lights were dimmer, their glow swallowed by their. He passed the reading tables, the shelves, the elevator, each shadow bending slightly toward him, like paper curling near a flame. When he reached the stairwell to the sub-basement, the door was already open, not wide, just enough to let the golden light spill out in a thin, trembling line across the floor. He stood there for a long moment, staring at it. Every time the bell rang, the light pulsed faint, rhythmic, alive, he whispered. "I told you I'm done." But his voice didn't sound like his. It came out thinner, like an echo spoken through water. The bell answered anyway, one soft note that felt like a breath against the inside of his skull. He stepped down. The light grew warmer. The air grew thick, heavy with the smell of old wood and burned dust. Halfway down, he heard footsteps above him, slow, deliberate, following the rhythm of the bell. He stopped. The steps stopped. He climbed one stair back. The steps above did the same. He whispered, "Who's there?" No answer, only the steady hum of the bell, deep and slow. He reached the bottom. The sub-basement door waited, the same brass handle, the same faint glow leaking from underneath. But now, for the first time, the sound wasn't coming from behind the door. It was coming from inside him. Every beat of his heart struck the same tone, echoing through his ribs, vibrating in his teeth. He pressed a hand to his chest. The ringing didn't stop. Miguel. He turned fast, too fast, hitting the wall with his shoulder. The librarian stood halfway down the stairs, the same faint outline that never quite resolved into a man. His face flickered again, like an old film burning through the reel. "You hear it now?" Harrow said softly. Miguel's mouth went dry. "Make it stop." Harrow tilted his head. "I can't. The bell isn't part of the building anymore." "Then what is it?" Harrow stepped closer, his shadow stretching long across the stairs. "It's you." Miguel shook his head, backing away. "No." "Yes," Harrow said. "The bell rings when something's being forgotten. At first it called us to fix the missing records, a misfiled story, a lost name, a misplaced life. But when the custodian starts to fade, when the building starts to lose him, the bell moves inside. It doesn't just call anymore. It becomes." Miguel's vision blurred. "I'm not fading." Harrow's eyes softened. "Then tell me what you did before this." "Before the library." Miguel opened his mouth and nothing came. Not a word. He tried again. but every memory he reached for came back hollow. The streets, the apartment, his mother's face, all outlines, no detail. He remembered sweeping, cleaning, signing out, walking home, but not where home was, not what color the walls were, not what he did with his days. His voice broke. "Why can't I remember?" "The bell's doing its work," Harrow said quietly. "You're becoming the archive itself. The more you try to remember, the deeper you ring." Miguel pressed his palms to his temples. "I don't want to be part of this place. Places like this don't ask permission," Harrow said. "They just wait for someone who listens too long." The bell rang again, louder now, filling the space with gold light. The shelves in the sub-basement shook. Dust poured down from the ceiling like glittering rain. Books fell open on their own, pages turning in time with the sound. Miguel shouted over it. "Then how do I stop it?" Harrow smiled sadly. "You can't stop the ringing. You can only pass it on." The light flared. Harrow stepped backward into it, his edges frayed, fading into dust and paper. "Miguel," he said as his outline thinned, "when the next voice answers the second call, you'll know what to do. Teach them how to listen. Teach them when not to." Then he was gone. The bell's sound deepened, lower now, slower, matching Miguel's pulse exactly. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest, gasping for air that didn't want to come. The golden light wrapped around him, bleeding into his hands, his arms, his breath. When it stopped, the silence was worse. He stood up slowly. The sub-basement was empty again, the shelves clean, the air still. The ledger lay open on the desk. His name glowed faintly on the page. Alvarez, Miguel. Status, Bell. His throat closed. The ink shimmered once, then sank into the paper like it had finished breathing. He reached for the ledger, but it was already turning to dust. The last word lingered before fading completely remembered. He climbed the stairs, each step lighter than the last. When he reached the ground floor, the clock read 3:01 a.m. The library was silent. He walked to the main door, unlocked it, and stepped outside. The night air hit him like a wave, cool, sharp, real. The city glowed faintly in the distance. Cars moved. Lights blinked. People existed. He touched the handle of the door, expecting it to feel cold. It didn't. It felt alive, pulsing once in rhythm with the faint ringing still echoing deep in his chest. And as he stood there, alone under the flickering streetlight, the sound returned softer, almost kind. The bell rang once more, but this time, he didn't hear it with his ears. He felt it in the wind, in the asphalt, in the heartbeat of the world. The city itself had started to remember. Morning came, but the light didn't reach inside Hartwell Library the same way anymore. The window still let in sun, but it never felt warm. The air was still, heavier somehow, like the building was holding its breath. The staff came in as usual. Diane brought her coffee, set down her bag, and turned on the front desk computer. Students passed through the turnstiles, yawning, laughing, existing. Everything was normal. Everything was wrong, because no one said Miguel's name. Not once. His locker was still there, a clean uniform hanging inside. His cart stood parked beside the supply closet, perfectly arranged. The mop was still damp, but the tag that had once read Mem Alvarez was gone. And yet every night, after the lights dimmed and the last student left, the building cleaned itself. Trash cans emptied, floors polished, books returned to their shelves without sound. No one saw it happen. No one heard it. But each morning, the place was immaculate. At first, Diane joked that they must have hired a ghost janitor. Then she stopped joking, because sometimes when she walked the halls alone to lock up, she'd feel a faint vibration beneath her feet, a pulse that matched the clock ticks on her wrist. Sometimes the air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Sometimes she'd catch a shadow crossing behind her reflection, a figure moving where there was no one. The bell had stopped ringing for the world outside, but down in the sub-basement, behind walls that no longer appeared on any map, something new had begun to hum. It wasn't a sound. It was a presence. The red ledger sat open on the desk again. A thin film of dust covered most of it, except one small corner where a single line of writing had appeared overnight. Custodian, active, function, memory preservation, supervision, self. The air moved faintly above the page, as if someone invisible was standing there reading. And then, as the clock upstairs struck 3 a.m., a faint glow bloomed between the shelves. It started small, the size of a candle flame, then widened, stretching across the floor, illuminating shapes made of dust and air. The particles rearranged themselves slowly, carefully, until the outline of a man began to form. Shoulders, hands, the faint tilt of a head. The outline didn't hold steady. It flickered, fading between substance and light. Where skin should have been, there was paper. Where veins should have been, there were thin golden threads. And when it breathed, the sound was the soft shuffle of turning pages. Miguel, or whatever remained of him, stood in the center of the library's memory. He didn't feel hunger anymore, or time, or even the weight of the floor beneath him, but he felt purpose. He looked at the shelves and saw everything the world had ever left behind. names half remembered, faces erased by years, stories that no one told anymore. He reached out, and the books whispered when he touched them, not words, but feelings, moments, echoes of lives once loud and now silent. Every forgotten thing found a home here. That was his work now, his eternity. Upstairs, the city moved like nothing had changed. Buses came and went. Students graduated. The air smelled of rain and exhaust, and every time someone passed by the library, they would slow down, not knowing why, and glance toward the old stone steps. Some swore they could hear a faint bell from inside. Others said it was just wind through the gutters. But the ones who lingered long enough, the quiet ones, the thoughtful ones, sometimes said they heard something else. A man's voice, calm, even, just whispering. Don't answer the first call. Those who ignored it never noticed anything strange, but every few years, someone would come to the library late, a new hire, a researcher, a janitor, and they'd notice something odd, a faint golden line across the floor where no light should reach, a hum that lived inside silence, a ledger on a desk that never collected dust. And sometimes, if they stayed long enough, if they listened too closely, they'd hear it, that quiet, patient bell, ringing once, then again. The first time, it always called to the missing. The second time, it called to the willing. And somewhere, deep below Hartwell Library, the man who used to be Miguel would turn toward the sound. No face now, only memory, and whisper softly, "Someone's listening." The shelves would tremble like lungs exhaling. A new key would appear on the desk, and the faint golden threads drifting through the air would vibrate, carrying one message through the endless archive: "We keep what you forget." The bell rang again, soft, patient, eternal, and somewhere, in the city above, another custodian woke up from a dream about a door they couldn't remember opening, a door with a faint golden light leaking through its cracks. When Aaron Patel took the night shift at Hartwell Library, the supervisor only said one thing: "Don't go downstairs." He laughed, thinking it was just an old building joke. It was his first week on the job, fresh uniform, new gloves, a name badge that still squeaked when clipped on. The other janitor had left suddenly a few months ago. They said his name was Miguel. No one seemed to know where he went. Aaron liked the quiet. The building after midnight felt different, bigger somehow, like the walls were waiting for something. He moved his cart from floor to floor, sweeping, wiping, humming under his breath. By 2:30 a.m., the library was empty. Only the sound of the ventilation remained, soft and even, like breathing. He finished mopping the third-floor reading room, packed up his supplies, and leaned against the wall. His phone read 2:46 a.m. He opened his lunchbox sandwich, apple, thermos. When he unscrewed the lid, the faint smell of coffee filled the air. That's when he heard it, a low hum, almost like a generator deep underground, pulsing once every few seconds. He froze, listening. It wasn't the air conditioner. It wasn't the pipes. It was deeper, like sound buried under sound. He walked to the window. The city outside was quiet. Streetlights hummed, mist rising off the pavement. He checked his phone again, 2:57 a.m. The hum grew louder, not through his ears, through the soles of his shoes, through his chest. And then, faintly, he heard it, a bell. One soft chime that seemed to come from inside the walls. It rang once, and the entire building seemed to breathe in. He stood still, heart thudding. What the hell was that? The lights didn't flicker, but the shadows seemed to move. He thought maybe a clock somewhere had struck the hour. Then it came again. A second ring, this one deeper, slower. It moved through the floor, through the desks, through him. He looked around, and that's when he saw it, a faint golden shimmer. On the far side of the room, just a thin line of light, running along the floorboards near the back wall. He thought maybe a bulb had fallen. Behind the paneling, he walked closer, crouched, and touched the edge. The light pulsed, and beneath his fingertips, the wood wasn't solid anymore. It was warm, soft, like something alive. He yanked his hand back, heart hammering. Okay, nope. But the curiosity was stronger than fear. He knelt again, pressed his palm flat against the glowing line. The sound in his head grew louder. Not a bell this time. A voice. Aaron. He froze. The voice was calm, familiar somehow. It said his name the way his mother used to when she wanted him to listen. He looked around, half expecting to see someone standing behind him. No one was there, only the faint shimmer of light beneath his hand. "Aaron, come help," he whispered. "Who are you?" "The librarian." The words came gently, like an invitation whispered through glass. He blinked hard, shaking his head. "All right, I'm just tired. I'm hearing things." He stood up fast, rolled his card away from the wall, and turned off his flashlight. But the glow didn't fade. It spread. The golden line widened across the floor, stretching toward the stairwell, one long vein of light leading down. Aaron's breath quickened. He stepped back, hands trembling. "This isn't funny." The air vibrated softly, and somewhere behind the wall, a low whisper answered, "Don't be afraid. We keep what you forget." The lights flickered, once, twice. When they steadied again, the golden line had disappeared. Aaron stood there for a full minute, waiting for his brain to catch up. Then he grabbed his cart and went to the supply closet. He locked the door, sat on the floor, and told himself over and over that he was just tired. Old buildings made noise. Electricity hummed. Brains got weird after midnight. It was fine. It was fine. By the time he clocked out at 6 a.m., he'd almost convinced himself it hadn't happened. Almost. Because when he returned the next night, the mop bucket was already full, the trash bins were already empty, and the floors, the ones he'd left dirty the day before, were spotless. He frowned. Checked the sign-in sheet. His name was there. Yesterday's date. His initials. But beneath it, written in a thin, neat hand that wasn't his, was a second line. M. Alvarez, active. Aaron stared at it for a long time. Then he picked up his cart and started his shift. He didn't tell anyone, but as he passed the old stairwell door, he heard it again, a faint hum behind the wall, and somewhere deep beneath the floor, the sound of a bell, soft, patient, waiting. It rang once, and Aaron stopped breathing. The third night made it real. Even before he clocked in, Aaron felt the library in his bones. A soft pressure behind the eyes, a slow hum under the ribs. The building watched him walk in the way a cat watches a door. Not hostile, not friendly, curious the way old places are when they recognize a pattern returning. He moved through the first floor, then the second, running his same quiet loop: trash, spray, wipe, set. He did the job like ritual left to right, top to bottom, like order itself kept the dark from noticing him. At 2:49 a.m., his phone dropped to 1 bar and wouldn't climb back. At 2:51, the paper in the printers wrinkled without jamming, the sound like dry leaves trying to remember rain. At 2:53, the exit sign over the north stair trembled, not the light, the plastic itself, like breath-hitting glass. At 2:55, a draft walked under the tables, tugging gently at dropped napkins, then smoothing them flat as if a polite hand had changed its mind. By 2:57, the hum had become a pulse. He paused at the window, gaze on the campus lawn. Fog lay low, a thin white seam stitched through the hedges. The statue of the school founder wore a wet sheen, as if something inside the bronze had started to sweat. He checked his phone again. 2:58. The seconds didn't climb so much as lean forward, slowly, the way a page tilts before it turns. He heard it then, the first bell, soft, low, not a tone in the air, more like pressure released from a distance, as if, somewhere below the building, a great rib had clicked back into place. The sound didn't travel to him. It found him where he already was. He stood still. The mop handle warmed beneath his palm. A long breath later, the second bell arrived. This time he felt it land on the floorboards, then rise, passing through him like a slow wave. The shelves answered with their own hush, every book spine making the tiny sound of leather shifting against leather. The brass lampshades gathered the sound and gave it back as light, warmer, closer, like afternoon trapped inside a bulb. "Aaron," a voice said. Not loud, not near. He turned, expecting the desk clerk or a lingering student. But the reading room was empty, except for a notebook left open to a blank page that looked suspiciously as if someone had just written on it and erased their words without smudging the page. "Aaron," the voice repeated. This time it came from the south corridor, the one with the framed floor plan and the wall that had never opened for him. The corridor didn't look different, but the shadows knew they were being watched. They held still too carefully. He started down the aisle, moving slow, as if coins were balanced on his shoes. His breath found the library's rhythm without asking him. The hum under the floor matched his steps. Step, hum, step, hum. "The building likes you," a stray thought said, and he hated how relieved that made him feel. At the corridor mouth, he stopped. The wall waited. The brass frame waited. Somewhere behind the plaster, the sub-basement waited like a held word. "Don't," someone whispered. He spun. No one. Just the green glow of a lamp thrown onto empty tabletops. He swallowed. "Hello?" He tried, quieter than he meant to, as if the books might flinch. "Don't answer the first call," the whisper said, and this time he heard it as two sounds, braided a human voice thinning into dust, and dust trying its best to remain a voice. Not a stranger. Not quite. It wore the shape of a name he didn't know he knew. Miguel. Aaron's scalp prickled. "Who?" The whisper came again, closer, at his ear without moving air. "If a wall says your name, let it say it twice." He stared at the seam where paint met baseboard, where the faintest gold had crept into the color without permission. The wall seemed to breathe in, hold then out a patience so that it didn't need to prove itself. "Aaron," the first voice called softly from behind the wall, the one that had promised help 2 nights ago. "Come help." His throat tightened. He thought of the supervisor's joke, "Don't go downstairs," and how jokes become rules when repeated enough times. He also thought about how the floors had been cleaning themselves, how the mop bucket had been filled before his shift, how someone had written M. Alvarez active beneath his name on the sign-in sheet in a hand too exact to be a prank. He had photographed that line. Twice. Each time, the photograph showed only his signature and an empty space where the second line should have been. "Aaron," the wall said again. Warm, polite. "You're late," he nearly answered. The urge rose like tide, half duty, half relief, the simple human pleasure of being expected. "Not yet," Miguel's voice said, thinner now, like a radio brushing through static. Wait, he didn't know why he listened. Maybe because the second voice sounded like a man trying to keep a promise. Maybe because the first voice sounded like a room trying to keep a schedule. He leaned his head back against the stone and shut his eyes. The hum under the floor slowed. His heartbeat matched it, or it matched him. The minutes stretched long and brittle. He counted breaths like a nurse in old movies. Somewhere far off, a printer clicked and failed to commit to the job. Then the wall spoke his name again. Not coaxing this time. Certain. Aaron. He opened his eyes. The seam along the baseboard widened the width of a fingernail. Warmth gathered at his shins as if a hidden heater had been waiting for permission. It didn't move. He waited for the third call, because he suddenly knew there would be one. It came like a page turning itself quiet, quick, inevitable. Aaron. He stepped forward. The wall didn't open. The air did. The paint kept its color. The plaster kept its pride. But between one breath and the next, there was a door where no door had been, and then there was only a room where no room could fit. He didn't see the hinge move or the jam shift. The world simply adopted a new shape and acted like it had always been born that way. Inside, a circle of shelves bending away into haze, a table with a lamp that liked green, a ledger so large it felt like furniture. The smell, cedar, old glue, the sweet electricity of a machine that has learned silence properly. The temperature, not warm, not cool, the absent weather of long-kept rooms. The sound, no sound, except the memory of sound settling on the furniture like dust. Aaron Patel, the first voice said with relief. "Good, you came on time." He found the man by degrees, a dark cardigan, sleeves rolled as if ink could stain him, a badge whose letters refused to hold still long enough to be read. The face was a sketch adjusted by someone who did not love faces. It wasn't ugly. It was unfinished the way clouds are always almost something. "I'm Harrow," the man said. "Catalog." Aaron wet his lips. "We don't have a catalog." Harrow smiled like he'd heard a child insist the ocean stops where the sand does. "You have the one upstairs. We keep the ones underneath. Do you hear bells?" "No," Aaron said too quickly. Harrow nodded as if that were the correct answer. "They'll fade. The first call is for missing things. It will try to sound like you owe it something. The second call is for working things. That one will ask you to help. The third call," he paused. "The third clears a space for you." I just clean." Aaron hated how small his voice sounded here. "That's exactly the job," Harrow said gently. "Cleaning is remembering with your hands." On the table, the ledger flipped a single page. No wind, no fingers. A line of gray ink wrote itself with patience. Patel, Aaron entered 3:02 a.m. Status, pending. He took a half step back. The lamp obliged by warming slightly, as if reassuring a nervous animal. "I didn't agree to this," Aaron said. "I don't even know what this is." "You answered the second call," Harrow said. "Agreement is what happens after." A whisper passed behind Aaron like cloth over wood. He turned. In the glass of a cabinet, He saw the faintest reflection of someone standing just out of frame, a man made of dust organized carefully enough to pretend to be a shoulder, a hand, a tilt of head. Not solid, not gone. He raised a hand without thinking, and the reflection raised its own a beat too late, then steadied so it wouldn't frighten him. "Who?" Aaron started. Harrow's eyes softened. "He's why you heard the warning. He's good at the job." The dust shape seemed to nod, a kind patience in the motion. The exact kind of patience floors develop after the 1,000th spill dries and is lifted without complaint. Aaron's breath trembled. "What do you want me to do?" Harrow gestured to the ledger. "Sign what you can stand to keep." "I don't want to keep anything," Aaron said. "I want to mop. I want to clock out. I want to go home and not dream about walls." "Then keep that," Harrow said, almost delighted. "A clean home, a finished floor, the sound of a door closing where a draft used to live. Keep those. The library will supply the rest." The ledger wrote another line. "Function, maintenance, access conditional, instruction. Do not answer first call." He stared at the words until they settled into the page like stones accepting the river around them. Something shifted to his left. A small card drawer eased open as if embarrassed by its eagerness. A single card stood upright among the blank ones, its edge gilded dull as old teeth. He reached out despite himself. The card leaned forward into his fingers like a bird that has decided you're safe. On it, a single sentence. "When a wall knows your name, ask it to say it twice." On the back, in smaller letters, "We keep what you forget." He turned the card over again. The sentence had changed. "We keep who you forget if you let us." The dust shape lifted a hand again. Not warning, not command, just a reminder that hands can be gentle. The room listened for his decision the way old trees listen for weather. "What happens if I refuse?" Aaron asked, voice thin. "Then you will be kept anyway," Harrow said, kindly as the end of a shift, "but not by us. By empty spaces. They're not as careful as we are." Aaron closed his eyes. He counted breaths the way a person measures out calm. He thought of his mother's apartment, the way the hallway light hummed, the way she always said, "Don't throw away letters with no names because someone always comes looking for them." He thought of the supervisor's joke, and how jokes are the easiest locks in the world when you need an excuse. He opened his eyes and did not sign. He set the card back, exactly aligned, as if the precision itself could be a boundary. "Not tonight," he said. Harrow's smile didn't move, but relief passed through the room like a cooler current under warm water. Good, the first safe choice. Aaron stepped backward. The door he hadn't used waited at his shoulders. Wood that was not wood, air that was not air. The wall outside had already decided to become wall again. He could feel the paint drying into the shape of refusal. Harrow tilted his head, voice softer. "When it calls tomorrow, it will sound like a person you lost. When it calls the next night, it will sound like yourself. The fourth night is gentle. The fifth is not. Bring the red book when you're ready." "What red?" he began. The lamp clicked out. The ledger closed with the quiet of lips finishing a prayer. The room exhaled and folded itself smaller than a memory. He found himself staring at a blank corridor wall, mop handle cold again in his hands. The clock on his phone slid to 3:11 a.m. The bars returned. The world remembered to be ordinary. He stood there a long time, waiting for fear to choose a direction. When it didn't, he did what to knew. He cleaned the line where the baseboard met the tile until the water in the bucket turned a tired gray and the seam looked like it had never held light. On his way to the stairs, he passed the sign-in sheet. 2 names. His, printed plain. Beneath it, a thin, exact line that wasn't ink anymore but etched in the paper itself. M. Alvarez watching. He didn't take a picture. He didn't tell anyone. He finished the shift, hung the keys, and stepped into a dawn that tasted like coins and rain. The bell did not ring again that morning, but the silence had learned his name. The fourth night began before the third ended. Aaron hadn't slept. He'd gone home, pulled the curtains tight, and still the room refused to dim. Every dark surface reminded him of that golden seam under the wall, that strange breathing silence that felt too awake. He showered twice and still smelled dust and old paper. He tried watching a movie, but the dialogue kept turning into whispers that said his name in between lines. He stopped eating halfway through dinner because the spoon trembled just enough to sound like a small bell when it touched the bowl. When the clock hit 10:47 p.m., he gave up pretending he wouldn't go back. He put on his uniform early. The buttons felt colder tonight. The air outside felt heavy, like static waiting to choose a direction. By the time he reached Hartwell Library, the city had quieted into that weird in-between hour where even neon looks tired. The library's front steps shone faintly wet, though it hadn't trained. The doors opened without resistance, and for a second he swore the hinges whispered, "Welcome back." He told himself it was wind or guilt. Inside, everything looked normal. The lobby lights hummed. The front desk monitor blinked. A stack of returns waited on the cart as if someone had sorted them earlier. His name was still on the sign-in sheet, and beneath it, the faint engraving that used to read M. Alvarez, watching, was gone. He stood there longer than he needed to, waiting for his pulse to decide what to do. Then he wrote the date, initialed the box, and pushed the cart forward. Wheels squeaked once, like a mouse warning another. By 2:30 a.m., he was in the history wing. The hum was back, not the steady pulse from before, but a quieter one, deeper, the sound of something thinking slowly. He mopped in long, careful lines. His reflection in the polished tile looked slightly delayed, like an echo that didn't know when to stop. When his phone buzzed in his pocket, he almost dropped the handle. It was a text from an unknown number. No message, just a single emoji. He stared at it. The timestamp read 2:42 a.m. He deleted it without replying, slipped the phone back, and pretended his skin wasn't crawling. At 2:53, the air shifted. It wasn't sound, not really. It was the sense that the room had remembered it was being watched. The far lights flickered once, twice. Dust rose from the bookshelves in thin vertical spirals, like the shelves were exhaling. Then came the first bell, soft, patient. Inside his chest, he dropped the mop. It didn't clatter, it landed like it had been caught midair. The second bell followed, closer, lower, right behind his heart. He closed his eyes, whispering, "Not tonight." But the room already knew his schedule. The tiles beneath his feet began to warm, slow as dawn. His reflection straightened even though he hadn't, and in the reflection's hands, the mop handle wasn't wood anymore. It was a spine, a book's spine, bound in red. Aaron stumbled backward, hitting the shelf behind him. Books trembled like birds deciding whether to fly. His reflection didn't move. It just looked at him, calm, expectant. The wall behind his reflection, where there had been only paint, was now breathing again. That same faint pulse of light beneath the baseboard. Only now, it wasn't gold. It was red. The third bell came like the soft crack of a knuckle. His ears filled with a deep rushing noise, like ocean under concrete, and beneath it, a voice not Harrow's, not the walls. Familiar, Aaron. He spun around, breath ragged. Miguel stood 3 feet away, not solid, not gone, made of ash and memory, the way a photograph looks when it remembers light. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the reflection of books, moving without wind. You need to leave, Miguel said. His voice trembled like paper under flame. I tried, Aaron whispered. Don't answer the third. I didn't. Miguel shook his head slowly, as if time were resisting him. His outline blurred, edges scattering like smoke trying to stay polite. The library doesn't ring for people anymore. It rings for replacements. Aaron's throat went dry. You mean you were supposed to clean the floors? Miguel said softly. Not the walls between things. Something behind Miguel shifted. The bookshelves warped slightly, their straight lines bending toward him like gravity had changed its mind. A low thrum filled the air, and every bulb in the hallway dimmed at once. It's listening, Miguel whispered. Pretend you don't hear. I can't, Aaron said, voice small. It knows my name. Miguel's eyes dimmed. Sorrow and duty mixed into the same dull light. That's how it starts. When you hear your name, say it back but wrong. Aaron frowned. What? Say it back wrong. If it believes you don't belong to your name, it can't keep you. The floor beneath them vibrated softly, heartbeat rhythm. The red glow deepened, spreading from the baseboards across the tiles, thin rivers of light crawling outward like veins seeking warmth. Miguel stepped back, fading. His outline cracked into drifting dust motes that floated upward like sighs. Don't let it spell you, he said. Not the real way. The light reached Aaron's shoes. The tiles under him clicked once, as if locking something into place. He ran. Every turn looked right but wasn't. Corridors looped back. Hallways widened where they shouldn't. Every lamp hummed at a slightly different tone, creating a melody that followed him like a memory of sound. He passed the sign-in sheet again, except it wasn't a sheet anymore. It was stone, carved deep. His name, Patel, Aaron, glowed faintly red beneath a heading that read, Current Staff. He pressed his thumb over it. It was warm. The letters shifted beneath his skin, trying to learn his pulse. He staggered to the main door. The keycard beeped red. The handle didn't move. He hit it once, twice again, until his shoulder ached. The door refused, and then, behind him, the bell rang one last time, a long, low note that sounded almost human. Aaron. He turned. The lobby wasn't empty anymore. Every chair faced the same direction now toward him. Every open book lay flat with its pages rippling as if breathing. The ceiling lights dimmed except one directly above the circulation desk, and there, sitting where Harrow had once stood, was a figure writing in the ledger. The pen scratched, steady, deliberate. Aaron took one step closer. Who are you? He said. The figure looked up. It had his face, and the mouth. His mouth smiled. Maintenance approved, it said. Welcome to the quiet. The bell stopped. Aaron tried to speak, but his throat filled with the taste of paper dry, old inevitable. His reflection in the window didn't follow him anymore. It watched, patient, knowing. The library exhaled, and somewhere below, in the endless dark archives, a new name began to write itself into the red ledger. Patel, Aaron. Active, function, memory preservation, supervision, self. The ink pulsed once, like a heartbeat, then dried. The silence above the desk felt satisfied, and outside, the city never noticed that Hartwell Library's janitor stopped clocking out. When the fifth night came, the world outside didn't know it had begun. Rain fell like sleep, slow, constant, forgetting what time was. The streets were empty. Even the dogs had stopped arguing with the dark. Hartwell Library looked the same from a distance. The same tired bricks. The same halo of light leaking from the upper windows. The same quiet that had been mistaken for peace. But inside, something had changed. The air no longer smelled like books. It smelled like remembering that faint, sweet dust that only rises when something too old has been disturbed. The clock behind the circulation desk had stopped, its hands pointing between minutes like they couldn't agree on a story. Aaron stood at the front doors before midnight and waited for the sound of the lock. It didn't click. It sighed. He stepped inside. The light came on before he reached for the switch. The halls were warmer tonight, like the building had decided to meet him halfway. His shoes left faint prints on the polished floor, and for the first time, he noticed they were following someone else's a second set, slightly ahead, fading as they went. He didn't bother clocking in. The timesheet already had his signature, dated tomorrow. The cart was waiting by the elevator, the mop bucket full, the key ring hanging neatly, labeled in handwriting that wasn't his. He touched one of the tags, basement access. The tag trembled under his thumb like something alive pretending to be metal. He didn't plan to go down. He planned to prove he didn't need to, but when the first bell rang, softly through the walls, the decision stopped belonging something to him. It wasn't a sound anymore. It was a memory of a sound, and it came from below. The elevator light blinked on by itself. 2. Sub-level that didn't exist on the blueprints. Aaron watched his reflection in the door. His face looked older, like the light had rewritten the angles. His eyes caught the glow from the button panel, tired, gold, almost kind. He pressed the button before he could stop himself. The elevator shuddered once, then began to descend. No sound, no vibration, just motion, smooth and patient, like falling in reverse. He looked at the numbers. They stopped at B2, then the screen flickered. B3, B4, B5. The doors opened without a chime. The floor was made of stone. The walls were made of shelves. Books stretched in every direction, some bound in leather, others in things that weren't quite leather, their spines pulsing faintly. Breathing with the rhythm of something that waited for language to return, a single table stood in the center of the room. On it, a red ledger larger than the one upstairs. Older. The cover cracked like earth after drought. Aaron stepped closer. The air pressed against him like water. His pulse synced with the faint hum in the room. The ledger opened on its own. The pages turned faster than his eyes could follow, whispering like many small mouths trying to remember prayers. Then it stopped. The ink on the open page was still wet. M. Alvarez released. P. Aaron active. Custodian. Transition pending. He whispered, no, but the air heard yes. The hum deepened. Books shivered in their places. The ground beneath the shelves cracked like it was remembering something buried. The fifth bell rang, not through sound, through everything. It came from beneath the stone, through the paper, through the shelves, through him. His breath hitched mid-inhale and refused to leave. His eyes widened as words began to slide across the walls, faint, ghostly letters glowing gold, sentences written without hands, names written without permission, stories told without endings. Each name that appeared had a heartbeat. He could hear them, feel them, like faint knocking under the skin of the room. He turned and Miguel was there again. Only this time not a ghost. Solid, breathing, eyes clear, face unscarred. He looked alive but wrong, too still, too balanced, like a statue deciding whether to move. You shouldn't have come back, Miguel said softly. His voice was human again. Aaron took a step forward. You're free. Miguel's smile didn't reach his eyes. No one leaves. We just finish our shifts. He nodded toward the ledger. It wrote you in. You can't undo ink that listens. Aaron shook his head. Then I'll burn it. Miguel's eyes flicked upward. You can't burn memory. The books began to murmur, now voices overlapping like crowds whispering different prayers in the same breath. Pages fluttered open one by one. Some names underlined themselves in red. Some faded entirely. The floor quaked. Dust fell from the unseen ceiling. If you answer it, Miguel said, you replace it. The fifth bell rang again, closer this time. The walls rippled like fabric caught in a slow wind. A new voice filled the air, calm, gentle, inevitable. Aaron Patel. He froze. It didn't sound like Harrow or Miguel. It sounded like his own mother. Aaron, honey, come help. He shut his eyes. No, you're late for work. He covered his ears. The voice didn't need them. We keep what you forget. He looked down. His hands were covered in ink. The red ledger was open. The pen sat upright, waiting, trembling slightly like it knew what to do. He heard Miguel whisper, say it wrong. The bell rang again, louder. Aaron Patel. He opened his mouth and forced the wrong words out. Aaron. Peril. The sound cracked. The air paused. The name twisted midair like smoke, refusing to take shape. The hum faltered. For 1 second, silence returned. Then the ledger turned a page on its own and began to write again. Not by ink this time, but by light. Patel. Aaron error. Name not found. Correction pending. He backed away. The shelves leaned forward. The air thickened. The fifth bell fractured into hundreds of smaller tones, each one a whisper, each one his voice saying a word he'd forgotten he'd ever said. He ran, but the aisle stretched longer, longer, endlessly longer. The elevator door was a star miles away. His breath burned. His pulse matched the rhythm of the room. Behind him, the ledger's voice said gently, we found you anyway, and the floor gave way. He fell through paper, through sound, through memories that weren't his. Every story he'd ever read fluttered past him, pages open, voices whispering, keep me. He landed not hard, not soft, just stopped. He was standing in the lobby again, the mop bucket full, the sign-in sheet waiting, the clock reading 12:01 a.m., a new day, a new shift. He looked at the sheet. Only one name now. Patel, Aaron Custodian, active. He looked up. The glass doors reflected the city quiet, wet and unaware. But his reflection didn't move with him. It smiled. Behind him, the bell rang once, soft, final, and deep beneath Hartwell Library. In the red ledger's last page, the ink dried forever beside one single line. Function, memory, access unlimited, term, permanent. The library had its keeper again, and this time it wouldn't need to call anyone else. By morning, Hartwell Library looked new again. The sun came up pale and quiet, painting the windows in sheets of gold that felt too gentle for a place that had swallowed a name. Students would walk through its doors in a few hours, rubbing sleep from their eyes, balancing coffee and hope and deadlines, unaware that the building had already finished a different kind of shift. They'd whisper about essays, printers, and due dates, never about bells, because they'd never heard them. The bells only rang for the ones who stayed too long. Somewhere behind the walls, the red ledger slept with its spine closed, its cover warm as breath. The ink inside didn't move. It didn't need to. The words it held were alive enough to keep turning without turning. Between two blank pages, there was a faint impression, the outline of a hand that had once refused to sign, now pressed deep into the paper, like time refusing to let go. The janitor's closet smelled of lemon and clean water. The bucket was full. The mop leaned against the wall, with the patience of old wood, and in the thin film of water at the bottom. If someone had looked close enough, they might have seen a reflection not of a man, but of motion, the gentle rhythm of a hand cleaning what could never be cleaned enough. At 7:01 a.m., the first key turned in the front door. The librarian stepped in, humming an old song that didn't remember its words. She signed the attendance sheet. There was only one name there, written neatly, precisely in handwriting that looked familiar but not quite human. Patel, a maintenance complete. She frowned, tracing the letters with a fingertip. New janitor, she murmured, then shrugged. Finally someone thorough. She didn't notice the faint pulse under the paper. She didn't see how the ink shimmered like a heartbeat before it stilled. Upstairs, a student reached for a book that hadn't been shelved in years. It came off the shelf clean, as if someone had just wiped it. Another walked through the hallway where the tiles always squeaked, and tonight, they didn't. The air was cooler, calmer, a whisper, soft and even, brushed past their ears, the kind of sound you don't really hear, only remember later, when you're half asleep. It said, "Shh," and they did. In the break room, the coffee pot clicked on by itself. A chair that no one had pulled out moved just enough to make room for someone invisible, and when the wall clock ticked to 8 yow, its second hand hesitated. The same hesitation Aaron's breath had before the bell claimed it, and then moved again. Down in the archives, behind 3 locked doors and one that didn't exist, a light glowed faintly. The red ledger had opened to a fresh page. The ink inside wasn't red anymore. It was gray, waiting. Sometimes, when the building got too quiet, a hum would rise through the floorboards, a low, steady rhythm. Not mechanical, not electrical. It sounded almost like breathing. Custodians came and went, contractors too, but none of them lasted more than a week. They said the mop water went stale too fast. They said the floors didn't stay dirty. They said the walls whispered things that didn't sound like words. But mostly, they said nothing, because some silences are smarter than noise. And once a month, exactly at 3 a.m., the exit sign over the north stair flickered once, twice the same double blink the old janitor used to count between breaths. If you were there, and the hallway was empty, and you stood still enough to hear beneath the hum of the lights, you'd think you heard the sound of someone working slow, methodical. Content, a mop sliding over tile, a bucket rolling softly, a man humming a song he didn't know he knew. And when you'd finally turn the corner, nothing would be there. Just clean floors, just still air, just a faint reflection on the window that didn't quite match your movement. The city outside kept living. Deadlines kept arriving. Nobody missed the janitor because nobody really remembered him, but the library did. It always remembers. It keeps what you forget. It keeps who you forget. And in that keeping, it stays whole. At 3:11 every morning, deep in the quiet heart of the stacks, the red ledger breathes once. The ink stirs. The page turns, and the world above keeps studying, writing, dreaming, unaware that every word written in Hartwell Library now echoes somewhere beneath it, perfectly, like a whisper learning to stay polite, because the library isn't haunted. It's awake, and someone has to keep it clean.